Michelle Gray, making your hair all purty. It already looks purty.
Oh, why thank you. Hi, Mama. Erik says, "Hi, Mom." He's is so funny because today he's been wandering around and wearing like one of those oh, they're like tank tops with like the big, you know what I mean? Like the white, it's a white tank top. It looks like an undershirt though.
Yeah.
It's got a really big open arm
Oh,
side to
yeah,
it.
right, right.
Yeah, and he's got a pair of baggy jeans on and
Why? He used
a
to
big
wear those white undershirts a lot, but
oh, because he says, because our air is we're having problems with our air in our house, and he says it's really hot in here.
oh no, that's fine. What are we talking about? We were talking about
Oh,
aliens.
yes, we are, and we've had so many requests. Paula and I have been talking about it, and we really do have pages of questions.
Yay. Well, this might be a multi-part thing.
Yes, I think it's gonna be because, there's quite a few of them, so you can go through and see whichever ones you'd like to pick. Because Adrian is here, and,
Have the
Adrian
questions.
he's been my friend in the shower.
Oh, Adrian. Oh, there are boundaries, dude.
He says that he doesn't look, uh, he says that's when I'm the most calm and the easiest to get to me when I'm not sitting down actually focusing to do this work.
Yeah.
He says that that's, a time that he, can get my attention, and so he's been talking to me a little bit, and, it's been quite an experience for me, so,
Now,
um
Adrian, people, if y'all don't know, is the spokesperson for the Tall Whites.
that's
And
right.
I love him. He's on my
Yes,
divine team. He helps me.
yes.
Anyway, how long is the your lifespan, your people, of your peeps? That's a great question.
He says, it depends, and this is very interesting. It depends on the purpose of what that lifetime is, but on average, he says into the thousands.
Wow. Oh God, it sounds awful. I'm kidding. As a human, that would be terrible.
He
But
says, as um, the existence in their race, there's so much that is accomplished in that lifetime, and he says existing in a frequency that is so very different than what we experience.
yeah,
The adversity that they do not see it that way.
I got you. Do you ever just relax, tell jokes, entertain yourselves, go have a pint in the pub, anything like that?
What he's showing me is it's like locking heads. He shows putting two heads together. And what he's saying is that they do share. He says, remember that everything is in frequency. And so they do share um, with each other, as well as he says they have things that are like, he says the best way that we could understand it would be like meditation pods. Um, or meditation vehicles. He says it's like a structure that has a consciousness that allows them to be suspended in an experience.
Mm.
Um, he says that it's difficult to try and relate to us in our terms, but he says that he'll give an example. He says, think of when we watch a movie and when all of our senses are engaged, but yet we're sitting still. He says this would be to that type of degree.
Interesting. I got a question before I forget. I put up this, or I don't. Archangel Michael and his crew put up this golden shield of protection that is supposed to be impenetrable to negative entities and all that. But for some reason, reptilians and I think other alien races that are not benevolent also can get through. So Erik told me to get Archangel Michael to put up something called the Blue Fire Flame of Justice Shield. Does that work? I mean,
Yes.
is that
He says yes. And so he's also saying about having to repeat your process. So he says that this is because the reptilian race, or many of the reptilians that are in question that we're speaking of, he calls them, um, they are powerful, but they're not more powerful than what love is. And he says that the blue flame, it's a very high frequency connected to the structure of what we would call the heart structure. But he says that this is connected to the overall source structure. And so if this is something that you're saying once, because he keeps saying repeating it. So it may be something that you have to repeat
Yeah,
every
I
time.
do. I do every week. I
Mhm,
do commit one day to something called retrograde
mhm,
integration, and also repeating whatever
mhm.
needs to be, whatever needs to be tweaked, etc. For I don't know the names of the people. It could be 30 people. It could be 10 people. It could be one person. But I should just, and I can't sit there and spell out everybody's name to let them know. But I just say anyone, blah 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 blah, and it seems to work. Now, Erik says there are 8 big issues that he wants us to cover. Maybe one of them homelessness, I don't know. But I just thought, and maybe it was challenging me, that it would be so cool to create a frequency set where we get rid of all those things that are not in anyone's greatest good here in the human collective, and then quickly shield with those 2 shields the entire globe. And can you imagine if nobody was bugged by these insectoid types or negative entities or reptilians? Is that even possible? And that would take a long time, but it might be worth it.
He says that it is possible, but he says he wants you to remember that um, the collective consciousness and all that exists in it that is of a lower frequency that affects humanity in what we consider a negative way. He says that if each individual on earth were able to align themselves with their truth, meaning they were able to align themselves with the purpose of why they were here and not connected to, say, material or the lower vibrational things, that many pieces of consciousness or the shifting of consciousness would be very easy. And so he says this would take many attempts, but he says that is it possible? It is. He also says to remember that as anyone is sitting here listening to this and thinking, is this possible? Could this actually happen? He says, do remember that there is much at play in our consciousness and the shifting that is occurring right now that is indeed not seen or heard right at this moment, but that will make things like this much more possible. So yes, he says, this would be something that you could do at different times that would have different degrees of power to it.
Okay, I just do it on a regular. I'll ask Erik how often I should do it. But it seems like if we got rid of all that and shielded the entire globe and shielded humanity and did this on a repetitive, that then people it might be easier for them to align their consciousness. I mean, we got rid of all
He
the things not in the greatest good of humanity.
he also says that there is he's calling it a golden egg that's being built around you, a shield that's being built around you. And he says that this is happening with your own will along with your divine team, and that this shield helps create a strength to the work that you're doing and also allows you and your work to not be penetrated by outside forces.
Thank you. I need that because I fight these things all the time, and boy, they are getting very aggressive. And I'm so grateful for concrete now, covering up all that backyard. And I'm crying partly because of Marcus. I had to hold back my tears, but I can't
He says that
do it
this
anymore.
is part of your healing. This is part of your healing because this is the process of how your vibration is shifting and the work that you have done, all that you are experiencing in this work. This is a great release. And he says, Elisa, he says, allow those to flow, allow those to release, because this is how we are able to put in this golden egg of protection and continue to build it forward as you sink into that vulnerability in your heart and you allow your vibration to continue to rise. We can then wrap ourselves around you to create the greatest good for humanity.
I will try my best, but these are tears of gratitude. What is your life, Adrian, like on your home planet?
I have children.
Oh,
I have many children.
oh. Send over their papers. I'm adopting all of them.
they like to visit. Earth is like a place of vacation for some of us. Um, Many like to come here to observe, and many like to come here to incarnate. But where I exist, we have community. We are built on community. And so we are very much in a process of creating together. We build structure out of creation. And so there is not much that is solid like it is here on your earth. So we create in hologram. It doesn't necessarily appear solid because all of us can experience something based on what our projective or what our need is. However, none of us really have these individual needs to say have a home structure in the same way that you would have it.
It's like
But
the
yeah,
afterlife then. It's like how it is in the afterlife, right?
it is very similar to that, although we do weave back and forth from a solid like material to a non-solid. We're able to transmute back and forth.
Wow. How long have you guys been around?
Well, that would be a very difficult question to
Because
put
there
in.
is no time, linear
I'll
time.
say billions and billions of years.
Wow, no wonder you're so evolved. Do you experience any hardship on your home planet?
We have in the past.
Okay.
Uh, we did have to evolve, much as many races in the universe have had to evolve.
Okay.
And so we have gone through hardships through uh, our history, um, somewhat different to what you have experienced. Um, we no longer experience many of the lower vibrations where we are because they're not necessary for our experience. And so any hardships that we would have would be more in a collective purpose. So, for example, when we are attempting to do something or create something, we wouldn't really call it a hardship. We would call it a
Yeah,
challenge.
challenge. Yeah. Oh, cool. Now, previously you said you found, I don't know if you said this, but find our eating habits kind of bizarre. What do you mean? Do we eat more than what we need? Do we eat the wrong food? It's like you saying, "Oh my God," it's like it's like eating poop. What we eat. That wasn't in the question. I just thought about poop. I don't know. Go ahead. Sue me.
Well, that's because we eat based on mineral. We do not eat based on joy. It's not that we do not have nutritional need, much as you do. There is a nutritional type need, but we are more like a molecule, like vitamins, certain types of necessities for us are more important than the act of eating. And so when we view Earth and we look at the humanoid and has how the humanoid likes to consume food, we find it very interesting and um, a little bit, we would use the word gross, but not in a demeaning way. But we find it very interesting how you eat when you're not hungry, how you use different food combinations.
Yeah.
He says that although we do have an understanding of the taste bud, many of us do incarnate on Earth. Many species do, and we do for that very purpose because Earth is a beautiful place to enjoy the senses, to enjoy the full sensory experience. Although, when we look at it from this perspective, we curl up a little bit.
That's funny. But don't you think it's kind of fun to have like a big old family, reunion and a barbecue and just the love that sometimes that getting together to eat brings?
Yes, we can appreciate that. Yes.
Okay. Good, because I don't know. You said gross is not demeaning, but all right.
But he says,
I'll give you that one.
I'll tell you, he's raising his finger because he says he shows dipping, thing like sauces, like dipping in things that like mayonnaise looks like
Oh,
mayonnaise, a white type of looks like mayonnaise, and dipping things in it.
Oh, potato, you don't like the ranch dip? You think it's gross?
He calls it unusual.
Unusual. Okay, that's a better one. So, what does your food look like visually? If I was to look at your dinner plate, what would it have on it if you had dinner plates?
He shows that what you were saying about poop is not so far off. He says that think of it as rocks, as minerals,
Okay.
um, leafy greens,
Okay.
um, pebbles. He also says things that look like crystals.
Okay. So a lot of minerals in your diet. Okay. Um, did you ever have, you're talking about some incarnate, have you ever had a human life?
Yes.
Wow. Are you talking about a real human life, or are you talking about just projecting part of your consciousness in and observing through a human?
Says that he's projected. A majority of what he does is projecting. But he says that many that he associates within his community do have current incarnations, because he talks about them being like happening at the same time,
Okay.
being in both places, projecting. But he's calling it an incarnation. He says, I guess there's two different ways, but he says that they have awareness, even though they're on, not when they die, but they can project themselves and experience a lifetime. So is that different? I'm just asking him, how is that different? But he says that they call it an incarnation, but it would not be like like the way we would think of it, like as a death and then a. But he also says it's not linear. So he says it's not in a step 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Um, do you have a wife?
Because he has partners.
Partners. Okay. Do you love your partners and your children? Do you feel love? And also, I do want to talk about your emotions. What kind of emotions? Do you have hate? But do you experience family type love, related love, and other types of love?
He says it's more like unity,
Oh,
that being with partners, and he says that they have many. They don't necessarily have one mate as we do on Earth, or that we um, that the natural system is more about unity. So he says that when you are side by side with certain partners, um, a lot, or you're working with them, he says it's like they become like an outlet, is how he's showing me. So you plug into that outlet and it's very familiar and your outlet fits perfectly.
oh,
So he
okay.
says it's more of a unity. It's not quite the same as the deep type of emotions that we feel on Earth. It's
Mm,
more of a completeness.
wow. Do you feel a love, fatherly kind of protection toward your children? I mean, when they're tiny and can't really fend for themselves.
He says yes. He calls it very similar to the way a mother bear would protect a cub. That
Okay.
that is similar. But he says where we differ from the human being is that we do not have dynamics of overprotection, or
Oh
we do
yeah.
not get involved. We encourage the exploration, because he shows his children and many children in their community, they travel through the galaxies,
Mm.
they travel past their own immediate. So he says that's very encouraged, so they don't experience fear.
Oh, that's another thing. Do you have any negative emotions like hate, fear? I mean, maybe not you, but any one of your race.
He says that it would be unfair to say that all of our race does not experience that, because he says that there are some that become affected, and he calls it sickness.
Oh,
And he says that this would be how we would describe many races, not only ours. that would have a polarity where they become infected by a negative vibration.
Oh, yeah.
It often starts by choices. It can start by, he says, some traumas. He also says that there can be um, within the DNA something cellular that has occurred that can make he says, a disruption in the nature of what our race or what many of these races are
Oh,
evolved to.
yeah.
Because he says that we are still part of an entire universe and universes and many polarities that do experience the light and the dark and many shades in between.
Wow. So you can have traumas, I suppose. You can have accidents, for example, things like that, those kind of traumas.
Yes, we can, but we also have the technology to be able to correct much of what occurs. So he just says that when we speak of accidents, the human mind would go to something very specific right now because he's
Yeah.
scanning. He's
I'm
scanning
thinking
what's
falling off a
happening.
cliff. That's all.
Yes,
I just go there.
yes, he's scanning and scanning everybody's response right now
Wow.
to
Putting
what
it
they're
in a
thinking of
fortune
accident.
coaster. No.
Mhm. And he says that the technology is so that it prevents an accident before it happens, so it's very unlikely.
Oh, wow. Are there any other illnesses that your race can experience?
He says that towards an elder age,
Mhm.
and he doesn't show the body does not decline in the way that a human body would decline, but he does show that there is vibrational shifting that occurs when that life is coming to a close.
Mhm.
And it does not suffer in the same way that a physical illness would be, but that there is some, um, he shows it like a leaf that shriveled up.
Oh, okay.
So it starts to shrivel, but he doesn't show affected by
Like
that's interesting.
viruses.
Well,
Yeah.
he's actually showing me what looks to be like a very luminescent looking arm, and it has burns in it, like burn marks.
Mhm.
And he's saying that there are some things that when we are removed from our natural state that could affect us, but that it's very unlikely. And I just asked him what exactly does he mean by that? And he's saying that because we have to understand that to really understand what he's talking about, we have to truly understand frequency and understand energy to get a good grasp on how our universe is and how we actually operate. And he says, so there are ways that we can travel interdimensionally where we could be affected
Oh,
by rays. He says even other versions of Earth that can affect him.
oh, interesting. So, but do y'all choose? Okay, that's the end of my lifespan. Mission accomplished. Do you have a free will, conscious free will
Yes,
to leave the body?
yes,
And when a tall white alien dies, do they reincarnate? And if so, do they have a memory of the last life?
yes. He says that the only time that we do not have memory of our existence is when we go on to Earth, when we
Mhm.
incarnate in Earth.
Yeah.
He says that we have the option to travel anywhere. He says there are many different planets and there are many different beings. Often we have, and this is where he says our cellular structure can be made up of many different beings when we
Oh,
have done that. So he says, much like on Earth, he says, as you are a human being at this moment, but do you realize that you are also a tall white? Do you realize that you are also a Palladian? Do you realize that you are also on another version of Earth right now?
who? Who's you?
Meaning
People.
people watching.
Oh, people. Okay, got it. All right. All right. So let's talk about reproduction. Do you reproduce in the same way that humans do, or is it all like in pods or test tubes or some other way?
He says that it's without bodily function.
Okay.
So there's not a like bodily fluid exchange,
Okay.
that it's not done that way, that it's done with consciousness.
Mm,
He shows there is a connection that occurs, and he's showing me kind of like what he showed before, with there being something put on their heads,
okay.
but it's not a solid structure. It looks almost like a hexagon, something like a hexagon that gets put on them, where they're connected to. Let's see if you can give me a little more detail with it. He says, to give the best explanation to understand it, is it would be like going body to body without exchanging any fluids, but it has to do with projecting consciousness into each other for a common goal.
Oh, wow. So you don't experience the intimacy and the pleasure of sex like we do?
No.
Oh. All right. So, what is set up for birthing? I mean, where does a child grow? The embryo. I mean, how does that happen?
He says that the um, depending on the host, because he says that we are not all necessarily male or female, so
Oh,
that the male or female, it's decided which partner or partners will carry it.
oh,
Sometimes there are several, so he calls it like a fleet. So they will create a fleet of children at
oh,
one time.
wow.
We can host more than one at one time. There are times where we can also have a human, if it's a hybrid child, that a human will host that child.
Yeah.
And then that child will go into some form of incubator.
Yeah.
He says that they do not birth in the way that we birth,
Hmm.
that it is more of like he says so it's a technology. It's like more like a technology. It's starting in he says, very sterile environment.
Yeah.
Um, he shows it being transferred. And I'm not quite sure how to explain the transfer process, because it looks very, very Star Trekky, or like it looks like I'm watching a
I,
movie.
I can imagine like beam me out.
Yes,
Movie. All
yes.
right. So where does the baby stay for how long in the body when it's hosted? Um,
He said weeks,
huh? Weeks.
weeks, weeks in
All
the
right.
body.
Where? Is there a womb to speak of, or is it just like free floating in the body? Yeah, I'm going to travel to the arm today.
He says that there's an encasing.
In case. Okay.
There's an encasing within the
Oh,
structure,
cool. All
but
right.
because he's just explaining that, because they are not solid, they are both. They can be solid and not solid,
Okay.
which is why because I couldn't quite understand how it was going back and forth, and he just said to me, because we are one or the other, or can be both at the same time. So it's all dependent on, he says, the evolution. We have evolved ourselves. So he says there was a body like structure at one time, but
Yeah.
he says that we've evolved ourselves to be able to have a process that is efficient, as
Mm.
well as there's very little chance for harm to the infant.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. One more question and we'll close because we're going to keep this kind of short. There's going to be many of these. So this is only part one. Adrian, if you could experience, you specifically could experience one human sensation, which one would you be most interested in and why? Sex, love, medium rare steak with roasted potatoes and cheesecake. That sounds good. Marriage, giving birth, surfing a wave. Oops, one. Having a 9 to 5 job, watching YouTube instead of doing housework, etc. Those are great choices. Oh my gosh. Okay, so what do you think?
Well, he says anything that gives depth to the senses. So he says that sex is something that he says it is the number one choice on most humans' agendas, that gives the most thrill to the senses. But he also says when it comes to thrill, he says bungee jumping.
Oh, Adrian, but I'm gonna take you to the amusement park. That's all there is to it. All right, anything else you want to say before we close, Adrian? And thank you so much for this part one.
Oh, he just says he loves you all, and he also wants to say that, yes, he says, "I am connecting with you," because he says that there's many that are attempting to communicate with him.
Mm.
So he just wants to let everyone know that, he speaks telepathically, and if you ask him to communicate with you, he says to watch for, um okay, he says that he will give examples of his presence dependent on what your level of ability to communicate is. So
Oh,
you may hear him, you may feel him. He says many will feel him, and he feels very tingly up the back of your neck,
oh,
up
wow.
here. So watch out for that for all of you that are asking to connect with him.
That's awesome. I'm so grateful, Adrian. And thank you so much for helping me and being part of the team. And thank you, Michelle, for being such an awesome channel for Adrian. You
Thank
guys
you.
can get in touch with her at thehealing-art.com, which of course we'll put in the description box and elsewhere. Love you guys.
Love you. Eric says, "Love you, mom."
Love you too. Adrian, we
Okay.
got to go work. Let's go to the she shed. Bye.
Bye.